Hey everyone, just wanted to welcome you to today's live stream. I am John Gannon. I am a product manager with DigitalOcean and I work on our marketplace, and I'm joined by my colleague Antonio Rosales, who works with me as the engineering manager on the marketplace. Today what we're going to talk about is how to make your quarterly planning process pain-free. We know from experiences we've had all over the industry that sometimes figuring out what you're going to work on with your team for the next quarter is not always the easiest process to go through. Sometimes it feels like there's a lot of friction. Sometimes it feels like there's maybe too many meetings, or other things can come up that just make it less than pleasurable and make you wish you were somewhere else. Well, we're excited to share how we do our quarterly planning process within the marketplace team. And we want to share that with you, but we also want to tell you about how we came to this process, because it didn't happen overnight. It actually came to be because the team collectively figured out that this was a great way for us to move forward and to make our planning even more effective. This talk is being recorded, so you'll be able to catch it again here on the DigitalOcean YouTube channel, or you can catch it on the DigitalOcean community as well. And that would be at do.co/tech talks. Again, do.co/tech talks. Now, I know you'll have questions, or you might have questions. Just type them in the chat window, and we will get to them after the presentation, after we go through the topics that we wanted to share with you today. And we'll answer as many as we can live at the end of the talk. All right. Let's dive in. Antonio, why don't you jump in on this one?
Yeah. Thanks, John, for the introductions. One of the things that we found painful for planning was not just the meetings and the rigmarole to go through that, but when you're actually executing on the roadmap and you find that we didn't have the right strategy, or we weren't aligned, or we just didn't have the right prioritization of items, and we have to pivot, right? And that can happen when you're just taking and copying and pasting what you didn't finish from last quarter into this quarter, right? So with John's leadership, we said, hey, how can you do this better so it's exciting to the engineers, exciting to the folks working on the project, exciting from an aspect of the process, but also when we get into it, it's aligned to our strategy. We have the right prioritization. We're all excited about the work, and we know we're going to be delivering the most value to our users. So here is where we're really trying to get away of trying to align to our strategy, our mission, and our vision, and not just copying and pasting what we didn't get done, and putting in the hard work to figure out what is the right thing that we can do for our strategy, for the value we want to deliver to our users, and going through that process. So it's a great quote here from Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumlitz, to really be thoughtful about what is your strategy, what is your guiding principle, what are the things that you do well, and what are the things you want to deliver to users, and really have a process that aims to achieve that. So it's kind of the bedrock of that process, that idea where you started working on this process that works well for our team, and that's where John's going to walk us through it.
Great, thanks, Antonio. And I remember distinctly when we first went down this road of changing how we did the quarterly planning. I think the quote, I think I'm paraphrasing it correctly, was the feedback from the team was, don't just give us a list, right? And so, we really took that to heart and worked together as a team to move to a model like this, which we're going to walk you through right now.
Yeah, just one quick note, the easy thing to do, and as everyone gets busy and you're in the quarter, you got lots of things on your plate already, the easiest thing to do is just get that list. And I think you can get to that point where you get to that list because it's the things you want to get done. You thought you need to get them done, but it's important, I think, to carve out time into your process to make sure you apply things that you've learned in the past quarter, and you're making sure that you're aligning to your strategy, and you have the best prioritization of the things that are going to deliver value, right? So all those things combined is where we ended up here.
Also wanted to say that what you're going to learn here, it's not meant to be a replacement of your quarterly planning process. And in fact, we delivered a version of this workshop internally at DigitalOcean to share some of this process if it could potentially help other teams within the company. And we said the same thing. Hey, we're not asking you to throw out your existing process, to change pieces of the planning process that are related to things at the company level. It's really just a tool in the toolkit to make that planning more effective and more pain-free. So if you follow or use some of these tools, there's a few different benefits that we think you'll see. And Antonio alluded to some of these. I want to walk through them really quickly because I think it's super important to really understand, like, why even bother with this, right? Why not just come with the list like you usually do? Why not do it the same way you always do it? Well, this process will help you get varied perspectives and ideas from engineering, from product, from design. And maybe you're not building something that necessarily has those roles, but this process will actually work for any kind of team. It doesn't necessarily have to be a software product team. It doesn't have to be a SaaS team. It encourages inclusivity, which is critical and important, and at DigitalOcean is really a value we hold pretty dear. It helps you reduce your blind spots. There are going to be things that perhaps someone on your engineering team will have thought of that you in product wouldn't have considered just because you're not spending your day-to-day in that realm. And so you're really actually getting a 360 view of everything going on and the possibilities that are there for your team to deliver value to your customers. And to Antonio's point earlier, this will help align, put air quotes around that. I don't really like the word align, but I think what really this can help do is it's really to help people participate in the process and feel like they're a part of the process and be a part of the process. But at the end of the day, eventually there is, spoiler alert, a list, right? You do eventually have to come up with that. But the idea is that even though maybe someone on your team didn't get their idea prioritized necessarily, they know their idea was considered, it was heard, it was debated, it was discussed. And that's the critical piece. And last, this we think can actually make it fun. So we're about to go into some more of the tactical of how this would work and give you some of the step-by-step. And the way that we would encourage you to at least try will really help, I think, make this even, dare I say, fun. So the process I'm about to share, we've tested it over the last 2 quarters. Like always, your mileage may vary. And there's 4 super easy steps. We're going to go into detail on each of those steps to let you know what you're in for. Here are the steps. So first, you're going to start with a wide open brainstorm with your team. And we'd encourage you to invite friends to that. I'll talk about what that means in a minute. Then after the brainstorm, you're going to synthesize and categorize the items that came out in that brainstorm. It's only at that time you're going to do step 3, which is drafting the list. And then the 4th step is finalizing the list. So step 1, the wide open brainstorm, and do it with friends. So what we do on our team is we obviously invite our sort of core team in terms of product, engineering, UI design, program management. We'll also invite what I would call our cross-functional pals, right? So folks that we don't work with every day, but folks who have additional context and do have knowledge of what we do in the marketplace and do have knowledge of our customers as well. So in a recent planning, we had some folks come from one of our internal teams that run a lot of our internal database infrastructure. We've had folks from our internal analytics teams join us, support as well. So really want to keep this wide open because this is an open brainstorm. At the start of the meeting, what we'll do is we'll fire up a Miro board, M-I-R-O. It's a really nice tool to visually conduct a brainstorm in a remote team. But you can use all different kinds of things. There's a lot of different SaaS solutions out there, and many of them have free versions like Miro that will let you do this. And then what we like to do is really just kind of organize the board so that each person who's attending, basically you'll see their name across the top, and then below their name, they're basically going to put their ideas for what should be worked on in the next quarter under their name. And usually we give about 10 minutes for that. So everyone's kind of silent. You just see a bunch of sticky notes flying around the board.
And one thing I wanted to add to that, John, is the one of the reasons we arrived at this as the first step is I kept getting feedback from the engineering team mid-quarter that we got the priority wrong, or we needed to get something else in the priority, or questions as to why we hadn't begun work on this particular project. And one of our fundamental goals that John called out earlier was that we wanted to make sure that everyone felt inclusive and that ideas could come from anywhere, and that we're trying to mold those ideas to have the best value delivered to our users. So it always was grating on me when we always heard that we weren't getting the priorities right mid-quarter. What I learned after some additional probing and getting some more feedback was that it was difficult for folks to give feedback when we went into the first planning session and there was already a list of ideas. And that was by good intent. Like, it was good intention by folks to bring in a list and say, here's some ideas we're thinking about in the quarter. But just having those ideas and in a group forum, there was feedback from folks that said, hey, I just don't feel comfortable challenging the list that's already there if the list is already made. And some folks might say it kind of poisoned the well, or guided this discussion, or any of those things. So one of the things we said is, hey, let's come into the first step is no list, wide open for everyone to come in, and it's not topping the list down yet. It's just gathering data. And so at this point, I got more feedback that folks were more inclined to give their ideas and didn't feel like they're having to challenge what was already there, and could state what they thought was the best value for the priority. And then we could take the prioritization down in the later steps and figure out how we align that to our strategy and our mission and our vision. Just wanted to interject that one quick point there, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for jumping in. A little more on step one. So after we take that 10 minutes where everyone is basically putting these different sticky notes about their ideas, we then group them. So we'll try to come up with high-level categories for what these things sort of are. It doesn't have to be perfect, but then we'll actually move the sticky notes into these different buckets. And usually the way we do it is we'll actually have each person on the team read down each of their sticky notes. Now, sometimes it's a pretty obvious sticky note, like deliver feature X, right? But sometimes it's a little more nebulous. And so in those cases, the person has time to really share what they meant, or want to give a little more context if that's necessary. And one of the other things we figured out is, because we're doing this in a limited time slot, right? We talked about the aspect of quarterly planning where maybe you're just spending a lot of time on it, right? Multiple meetings, things like that, that can really sort of suck the life out of the process. And so what we do is we recognize there is a time constraint, but instead of just moving left to right in those columns that I showed you, right? Starting with, in this case, Jim, and then going to Paul, and then going into Julie, we'll actually, you can see here on the left here, we say work from outside to inside instead of left to right. So you're basically just kind of going inwards so that the person whose name on the right, they don't get missed just because, oh, they were the last person to put the sticky note in with their name, or I put them in last, right? So we've found that kind of encourages that inclusivity. And then I already talked about asking for clarification if the idea isn't clear. Now, again, we're brainstorming. This is not a time to judge the ideas. This is a time to make sure you understand the idea and to welcome new ideas and to build on these ideas. That's what a brainstorm is all about. Later, again, we're going to do the categorization, the debating, and all of that. That will come, but this is not the time for that, because you really want everyone's mind to be very wide open. You want this to be a really welcoming environment to bring ideas to the table. And one sort of lesson or way to think about this is, in the world of improv, I don't do improv, but I certainly listen to a lot of comedy podcasts and things like that. There's this concept in improv called yes and. So in an improv sketch, the reason that they can go on what seems like for minutes and minutes without any kind of script is because whenever someone makes a statement, the response from the other person on stage is yes and then they build on it. So keep that mindset in mind when you are doing this brainstorm. And remember, at this stage, there are no bad ideas. really this is about getting all the ideas on the table. You're going to put on the critical thinking lens shortly as you start to work towards that final priority list. So the second step is now you're going to synthesize and categorize those brainstorm items. So we actually, on the right side of the page, I took a screenshot, I fuzzed out just a couple of things, but this is the exact page we used in Q3 to organize those ideas and get them on a page so that the team could ask questions, comments, could debate, right? It's all fair game. And the great thing about doing it here in this document is it's actually all in the open as well. So everyone can see what everyone's talking about. There's, I guess there could be side conversations going on, but this is really the central point. If you have not put your ideas or feedback in here, then we assume that you haven't wanted to give it. And we actually, multiple times over the span of, say, a week, we'll actually remind the team, like, make sure you review, make sure you comment, because it's critical that we get that feedback, because if we don't get that feedback, then the process has failed. And we want to make sure that the process is successful and making sure that we're getting the best ideas, we're debating the ideas, we're getting the context on the ideas, and that the team is really, truly not only feeling included, but is included in the planning process. So we let that run for a few days. And then finally, step 3 is when we draft the list. And we use those brainstorm items as input. On our team, typically, I will do that first draft of the list, but it sort of depends on who you want to assign that role in your team. It just depends on who's on your team, what the structure is, etc. Antonio, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, one thing that John has really guided the team well here on that has been helpful for us is this validating a hypothesis. So this is all forward-looking. So we're going to ultimately have to make some bets and some guesses. But where we try to do it is in as much as a scientific process as possible. So we'll go and we'll look at what we've learned from the past, what our vision is, but also what is the data we're getting from users, what are the things we're hearing. Based off those things, we'll make a bet, we'll make a hypothesis. And John is really great about saying, we want to know the value we want to deliver. Maybe that's a large project we want to get to, but what is a slice we can take off today? Can we deliver something to the user that can help validate that what we're thinking is correct, right? And there's a whole other process on how you do an MVP, but specifically here, the part I want to call out is really take some time in this roadmap as well to be okay with the discovery items, to be okay with saying, hey, we want to validate this, we want to do a POC, we want to put this under a feature flipper, we want to put this into our roadmap where we're making incremental improvements to the ultimate feature and validating our hypothesis and getting feedback from the users. So this doesn't have to be in the roadmap to say this is how the final thing looks. It may be this is the first slice of this that we're going to get done, and based off that input, we'll adjust from what we learn.
Absolutely. And one other thing I would mention here is that on that actual page where we have the list, at the top, what we do is we'll actually take the company goals at a high level and some of the metrics we're shooting for, say for year-end revenue, et cetera, and we'll just put them right at the top of the page, right? Because we want everyone to have that context, like, hey, this isn't just a list of stuff, right? Like the list is tied to this overall context about what's happening at the company and what the company is really expecting of our team.
One of the things to add on to that as well is when the list gets into more of a final state, we'll have the thing that we want to do, but in that thing, we'll try to put it into a SMART goal, something that's going to be measurable, achievable, trackable. So we'll have it very pointed to say, is this something that we can evaluate at the mid-quarter, at the end of the quarter, and say, did we complete it? And what were our goals? So we'll try to say success is when we accomplish this metric, so we can tangibly go and achieve it, and then say this is why it was successful, and this is how that metric helps achieve the company goal. But it's good to get to the point where you have that roadmap item where you're very pointed as, what do we call this success? What does success look like? And if you can have an objective measure to it, where you can have data and it's very black and white, that's even better, right? So then you can come through at any point in the quarter, measure it, see how you're doing, and at the end of the quarter, say we're done and we're successful because we met this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that list, that draft list, where we have the data, we will certainly say move metric X to Y or grow metric A by B%, right? We'll do that. the reality, and I'm sure you all know this from building products as well, is that sometimes you actually don't really have the data, or you or basically you don't have the data, right? And so there may not be time to instrument that data before you start working on the thing you're working on. So in those cases, sometimes the goal is ship feature X, right? And we try not to do that. We try to tie it to a metric where we can, but let's be real, sometimes that's not possible. So it's a mix. And it identifies gaps, right? Where maybe you do need some measurement. And so you can kind of start working on that. Maybe you don't have it when you work on this feature, but down the road you have it. So when you work to build that feature or enhance it, you actually have some data to see if what you did move the metric, move the KPI that you were looking to move.
And what you do well there is where we don't have data is you'll say, deliver feature X, and X is this. So if it's a brand new feature where we don't have an instrumentation and we can't have the actual data there, we'll say this feature is complete when it has these capabilities, right? And that's great for us to then make sure that we're mapping those to user stories or epics, that we're making sure that we're always going back and we're achieving this functionality. And if we're doing iterative development, we want to say, hey, we want to have this whole development, this whole value at the end of it. But for this particular roadmap item, we want to make sure that we can at least do this for the user, right? And that's also great to have as at the end of the quarter, can we do that? And if we can, that's great. It's something we can measure as well.
Yep, absolutely. So then step 4 is finalizing that list, right? At the end of the day, you need to be able to tell either your company, your team, your boss, whoever, what you're going to actually work on. So when you're finalizing the list, it's critical, if it already hasn't been communicated, that make sure folks know why something is a priority. So again, that framing, if at the top of your document where you're sort of creating this list, if you can put the company context, the goals for the company, et cetera, at the top, that can really help with the why. And then if you're the person who's coming up with this draft of sort of the final or finalizing the list, if you're kind of in charge of getting that over the finish line, really make sure that you have some actual verbiage around specific items that maybe it's not clear why those are tied to the company goals or to your team goals. So just being really clear about that. And then on that final final list, right, you're still going to give your team a few days to make comments and give feedback. And again, with our team, we put it out there, we call it a few days to a week. And we really, we probably get a little annoying about it, and that we really sort of bug people. Hey, if like you haven't commented on it, like jump in there. This is your, opportunity, because the feedback, right, from earlier in the year was that we wanted to make sure that that feedback was really being accounted for and looked at and incorporated. So after that, what we really try to do, and this was another learning we had after doing this, I think for one quarter, where we had that like final list, we had people leaving comments and things, but some of the comments were left open and there wasn't a closed loop on those comments, meaning someone gave a piece of feedback and there were a couple of cases where it was sort of left there. No one jumped in and said, I agree, I disagree. It was just there. And so it was sort of left to interpretation on those specific comments. And that later on in the quarter, we realized that, hey, some of those comments actually, they weren't resolved and they were important, and we should have gotten a resolution there. So now we actually are very deliberate about that and make sure that all comments are addressed. And when we say addressed, right, it's okay to disagree. It's okay to agree to disagree, right? You're never gonna get 100% everyone agreeing on every single thing in one of these planning processes. It just doesn't happen, and it shouldn't happen, right? So just making sure that every comment is recognized and then resolved in the sense of like, hey, we're gonna do that this quarter, or no, we're not gonna do that, and here's why, right? That's what you really want to get to and have that conversation. And again, we do this in Confluence, which we use for our wiki. You could do it in a Google Doc. And certainly we have conversations, sidebar conversations as well as we're going through the planning process. And all of that sort of put together really helps it come together. There's a few additional resources that we wanted to share with you before we move on to the Q&A. And we talked about Miro already, which is the whiteboarding. Antonio, maybe if you could talk about the blog and the book suggestion to let folks know why those things would be great to read and review and maybe even share with their team.
Yeah, starting with the blog, it's good to have when you're talking with your team, you're talking about things like vision and mission. It's good for the team to all have a common understanding when someone says vision and when someone says mission, what context that's coming from. So everyone has the same definition. This particular one, vision-based frameworks, it's not the only one you could use. It's just one that we use. It's nice that it has a big, hairy, audacious goal. It has what your overriding mission should be, and then it has what your vision. So once everyone kind of gets into that framework and you all agree to that, use that framework, that's the most important thing, because then you can really start talking about like what is the right vision for us, and having that right context goes a long way, because a lot of times I'll see disagreements around what the vision or mission should be, but it's not because there's not agreement on what it should be. It's just that folks have a different definition of what vision or mission could be. Good strategy, bad strategy, also a good learning from me, and the fact that strategy is a deep, deep science. And this book doesn't solve all of it, but it provides some rookies like me some good insights and how you can be thoughtful around strategy. Again, it's a good point to have the common language around the same team around how you develop what Richard calls as a kernel of a strategy, to have the problem definition, a diagnosis, and a guiding principle, and then also to be self-aware of where you're at in the marketplace and what you're trying to achieve and the value you want to deliver, which again goes back to that vision.
Great, thanks. And in the chat window, it looks like those links are popping up there as well, so you can grab them and copy them off and take a look at them later. So we actually have a good amount of time for additional questions. I think there was one, Antonio, that you were going to jump in and address, so I'll let you grab that one.
Yeah, this was more, I think it was more of a comment, but if I'm reading it incorrectly, this was a question from, I believe, Minty, Mintii. I think Minty was saying that at their company, they are talking about what does success look like. Success is measured in, I think they call it OKRs, right? So the exact quote is, what do we call success? At their company, they frame them as OKRs, and those are objective key results. And those are exactly aligned to what we also try to have for our goals, is that should be something measurable, and it should be a key indicator, whether you call them objective key results or you call them key performance indicators or goals. It should just be something that says, this is a data point we can look at that tells us whether we're on track or off track. And the more objective that is, it's better, because John can come to me and ask me all day long, is a product good? Is it good? Is it good? And I can say it's good, but as soon as he comes back and asks me, why do you think it's good? I need to have something material that says, well, why I think it's good is because based off our key performance indicators or objective key results, we wanted to have this amount of users using the product, and we have, achieved greater than that 2%. So I think we're trending all right, something to that effect. So I think that was a comment that we had from Minty, I believe. If that was not a question or a comment we need to expand on more, just feel free to post it on the comments.
I wanted to add something on OKRs as well. So I've been at DigitalOcean, now it's been over 4 years, and we, for a while, sort of earlier in my stint, we actually did use OKRs at the company level. And now we've moved more towards, I would just say, company goals. And yes, there are metrics tied to them, but we didn't use the OKR system. And I bring that up only to say that, well, really two things. One is that OKRs certainly get a lot of press in the startup world, and Google uses them, right? So there's some weight to that. But at the same time, that just might not be the right system for your company because of the company size or the company culture. So I would definitely encourage you to find a goal setting system that really works for you and for your team. There's another question that is, how do you ensure teams buy in and meet expectation and deadlines like big companies like Apple, et cetera? Antonio, I'm going to bounce this one to you because you work obviously with the engineering team and sort of make everything come to life in terms of what we are trying to build. So I think that would be a great one for you to talk about.
Yeah, it is a hard thing to do, so I'm not going to disqualify that because it's an easy thing to get right. And John and I have been trying to work at this. We've been building a marketplace team now for coming on 2.5 years now, right? And continually improving the process. So I'll say number one, start with the process, but then always try to continue to improve it. This process that we developed here was specific to try to get buy-in from the team, what you saw here, which is making it wide open. The other part that we said when you come into this as well is making sure you have that mission and that vision aligned. And once you have your mission, your vision aligned to the team, that's also going to align to the company. Those are going to set what are most likely going to be your department or your team's, they call them like business objectives. So they'll probably say for your team, you need to deliver these things to be successful, right? If you don't have that definition of what your organization or your department or even what your team should be delivering, what the business is going to look for you or your project you're involved into is going to look for your team to deliver at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, you definitely need to start there, right? Because any list that you create from there or roadmap you have is going to be different misconceptions of what people think success is. So like step 0 is really making sure that you've got a good, clear definition, and it could be something as high as revenue, or it could be as something as getting users, or it could be as something as simple as making sure that you deliver it on a certain project. Make sure that you have a good understanding of what the business or the project is looking to your team and your department to deliver. Then based off that business objective, you can go and help evaluate what is your strategy, right? So it flows down from not just having a good quarterly planning, but your quarter planning set to know what is your business objectives or your project's objectives for the year. How does that align to your strategy? And how does that strategy then weave up through your mission and your vision? So once you get those things set, it makes it a lot easier for the company to get buy-in and set expectations on deadlines, because you're saying, hey, like in our priority and our strategy, we had these 10 ideas from Brainstorm, but the way we came to a conclusion on the top 3 is because we all agreed as a team, we want to deliver the most value to users in the marketplace around new droplet creation, right? And we said, hey, like everyone agrees that means that these 3 features are going to be ahead of the next 7 features, right? And it's good for the team to have that understanding, because then now it's not my opinion versus someone else's opinion. It's just objective data that we all agreed upon for our project goals and our company's success. These are the things we need to deliver on. So that's at least how we try to approach it. Start at those big blocks, define it for your team, do what works well for your team, and then get feedback and iterate on it and discard what doesn't work and keep putting into what makes better.
Yeah, one of the things that's I think a big takeaway, and I think our team does a good job at this, and I don't see a lot of teams, and I've been in the industry now 20 plus years. I don't see a lot of teams iterate on their own way of working together. And I think that if you can incorporate that into your process, it makes the team self-healing, it makes the team more inclusive, and it just makes the team better, and it keeps things fresh, right? So I think that is a really important point to take away as well, because if you have that kind of culture in your team, trying out this new kind of process is sort of a natural thing, right? And maybe this doesn't work, so you try something else, or maybe next year you start OKRs and try that for a quarter, right? So I think that really not just working on the product or the thing you're building, but actually working on your team is a critical piece of this. There's a great question here about, is it okay to add more scope to your goals? I'll give my perspective from a product management perspective, and then Antonio, I would love to hear his thoughts as well. I think it's definitely okay to add more scope to your goals if you think that it's going to make a meaningful impact to those goals. So you have to really take a step back and think about, if we add this scope, what's the result going to be either now or in the future? And then also, nothing comes for free, or very little comes for free, right? You always have to talk about trade-offs, and that's something that Antonio is really good at teeing up and framing up. So if you want to jump in, Antonio, and talk about this a bit, that would be great.
Just real quickly on saying the trade-off is also opportunity. So what's the opportunity cost? So if we add scope and we deliver this feature, we think it's going to deliver X more value to users, how can we compare that to what we're not going to deliver? So if we increase the scope and it even goes extra 2 weeks or 1 week, that means we're not going to do this particular thing. And so when we frame it in that aspect that says, hey, we're not going to make as much on this, what's the opportunity cost to not do that? And if the new feature is greater than that, and we talk about it as a team, we'll most likely try to make that. The other part is making sure the whole team knows about it. and that you're communicating, upward to your management and to other teams in case there's any dependencies. So it's something that we don't, always try to intentionally go looking for, but we always say we leave we try to be smarter tomorrow, or we leave the door open to be smarter tomorrow. So if there's some new data that comes up that we just didn't know yesterday when we we're making the plan, we'd need to be, flexible enough to change it, but try to do it in a way where we evaluate the opportunity cost and make sure folks know about it.
And aside from adding more scope to goals, one of the things we talked about is that this process is really meant to help avoid, in the middle of the quarter, the team saying, hey, like, why are we working on this goal? Like, why was this even a goal, right? Like, we want to avoid that conversation, but we want to have the conversation if someone brings new information to the table that should force us to reevaluate the current goals we have. And things move fast in our industry, right? So those things do come up. And so an example, really recent example actually, was we were, I think, in our daily stand-up, and this was just a couple of months ago, and one of the engineers in our team said, hey, you know what? Given what I know about where we're going to probably be going in the next quarter or two, there's this feature we should maybe think about just doing as a first step. And he explained the feature, what it would do, and we got really excited about it. We're like, yeah, actually, that's great. We need to go and do that. And so we changed priorities in the middle of the quarter. We put that at the top. And then you may have seen last week that we released the deploy to DigitalOcean button so that you can deploy open source software directly into the DigitalOcean app platform and promote usage of your application, easy deployment of your application, et cetera. So that feature, it had been talked about over the years when I was at DigitalOcean, but things sort of fell into place because we had the app platform, which is an ideal place to have a simple deployment, an easy deployment process for an open source application. And we knew as a marketplace that the app platform opened up some opportunities for us. And so by the fact that this engineer in the team, who, by the way, is, I think he's about a year or two out of graduate school, right? So one of the sort of newer members of the team, really brought to the table, and everyone said, yes, this makes sense, and we went after it. So you have to be flexible. This is not meant to create a process where we're doing the thing and it will never change. We do want to still be open to that. And I think we've, this quarter, we kind of proved that we can be open to it. And time will tell, obviously, with the feature. It's only been out there for a week, but we do think it'll have a major impact in terms of how our customers can get other developers to actually use and deploy their software. We've got another. Oh, go on, Antonio. Right, were you about to say?
Oh, the next question as well says, what does your process look like between two quarterly planning? Do you break away from your output from the previous planning, or do you monitor it closely rather?
I'll answer I think I understand the question. I'll give my perspective on it. We don't, I wouldn't say we break from the output from the previous planning. It's always, I think, in the back of folks' mind, including myself. But the brainstorm, some of those items are just going to end up in the brainstorm, right? So if there's something that I thought we should do last quarter, but maybe we didn't do it because we weren't able to prioritize it, if I still feel that would be something useful for us to work on, I will write a sticky note and I'll stick it there, right? And so it will come back in the process. And same for Antonio, same for anyone on the team. So yeah, so we don't sort of wipe the slate clean. I think that context does come along with us. And then there's one more question about, can you help to summarize what conversations you might have had with your teams prior to the brainstorming session to outline your higher level vision or strategy to support their thinking? So at a project level, if we're starting what I would call a medium to large sized initiative, we will do specific sessions independent of the brainstorming about those things. So an example might be we have Kubernetes applications, one-click apps in the marketplace. So when we got started on that, this was going on a year or so ago, we did a session purely focused on the context setting around why do we want to do Kubernetes one-click applications? What's the value to the customer? How does it fit in with the strategy? How does it fit in with the company goals? And even before that interactive session, one of the tools that I really like to use, and I maybe we can send the link afterwards, is Atlassian, who makes Jira and Confluence, etc. They have a really nice template for they call it a project poster or a one-pager. And it's really a short document that is a way to frame up the why for your team. So why are we working on this thing? What are the things we know? What are the things we don't know? And what are some possible solutions? And getting those on a page, other than getting the team engaged and kind of seeing where you might be coming from in terms of why you think this is important to work on. But frankly, as a product manager, and I'm big into, I like to sort of write things down, and that's just the way I work. So it actually helps me think through what I think we should do as well. So it's not just about putting a final set of thoughts on a page. It's really about taking the thoughts, thinking them through, putting them on the page, and then working with the team to make them more well-formed.
Yeah, and the last two questions really formulate on, what are quarter to quarter for these longer term objectives, how to make sure they don't fall off, and how to make sure the team does know. We'll have a kickoff on our overall mission vision. We'll have that documented where everyone can see it. As we onboard folks, we'll know that what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day is making sure we can have a place where vendors can offer their software and users can, be able to use it on their infrastructure, right, for marketplace. So everyone should have a general understanding of that. And then we may have some projects that span multiple quarters. We'll have that one pager on the why. We'll make sure everyone understands that, and we'll kick off on that. Now that big project might have brainstorming ideas on where we need to figure out what's the best way to move it forward. But everyone on the team should have an understanding of what our vision is, but they should also have an understanding of, like, on a one pager, why are we doing this particular thing that may span multiple quarters to up to a year, on what success looks like there, why we're doing that, what is the problem space, and have it documented. And that's great for teams, not only your direct team, but other teams who start collaborating with you and need dependencies. You can easily give them that one pager and say, this is why we're doing this. This is what we want to scope it to. This is our measure of success. And it gets everyone in the same frame of thinking, right? Now, from that frame of thinking, you then can come down and talk about what are the smaller pieces that we need to objectively deliver in this quarter to help make gains on that larger why.
Okay. Go on. I'm sorry.
Okay, there's the other question I think we had here, right? Was the last one? Do you conduct additional market research for your product space and combine it with the results of this process?
Short answer is yes, we do. And in fact, we were just spending some time recently looking at the WordPress market and looking at some of the things going on there, both with our own customers, which I would call sort of internal market research, and then external, in terms of looking what solutions there are on the market to solve some specific problems that we see in that space. And so it gets combined as part of the brainstorming process, because those things and that work and some of that socialization of that information that's happened with the team over the last couple of weeks, that's bound to come up in some way in our quarterly planning, because again, the context will be pretty fresh in our minds. So it's not we don't have a specific thing built into the process that ensures that the market research is sort of like forced in there. It's really about, as we're thinking about these things, doing the market research, and then that context is really helpful when you get past the brainstorm and down into those next stages, where you're trying to really explain, like, why should we even go and do this, right? And that market research is there and really ready to include in terms of why is this thing the first thing on our list for next quarter that we might want to work on, for example. There's also, go on, Antonio, I'm sorry.
Finish your thought, John.
No, I was going to skip to the next question, so you jump in.
I was going to say real quickly that the thing that John does well as a good product manager here is a lot of this process is taking ideas and opening the aperture as wide as possible and making sure there's buy-in and making sure we've applied as much learning as we have. But John also does a great job as a product manager to apply, some of the fundamental product manager things that we do for research. What is user feedback? User interviews. What is it? How many users do you have coming into our funnel? Working with our research team as we kick off on new big projects, defining what are the jobs to be done. What are our users saying? What are their pain points? Doing actual interviews. Our user experience team does a great job on reaching out to folks and having direct interviews with them and sending out surveys and getting that data as also a data point. So when we have the large list of things and an overriding guiding principle for our strategy mapped up to our business objectives, we can then apply our product strategy to say, these are our research and our objective data we have. We mix those in with our ideas we have, and then we crank them through our process, and that's the list we end up with. So it's not so much just taking a bunch of ideas, starting fresh quarter to quarter, and then just only taking those ideas out in a priority order. And it's some of these we're talking about here, where we've done on the one page our business objectives. We have those overriding principles. We've done some user experience research as well. We pull all that data into this process. So by that step 4, you have all those combined into the process where you believe at that point you got a really good prioritized set that aligns well to the business and the research we've done. You're going to say the next question, John?
Yeah, there's a question about internal roadmap. Is an internal roadmap given to the entire organization to understand the new pathway or enhancements? And we do have company level roadmaps as well as roadmaps that are specific to a group of products. So for example, the marketplace fits in our what we call platform as a service. And so we have a platform as a service level roadmap as well. And there's visibility to that across certainly the company and then also within the platform as a service team. And also I wanted to point out the project poster that we use to frame and then kind of start to kick off new product initiatives. There's a link to that now in the chat window. So highly recommend that. And Atlassian just has a lot of great resources around how to make teams work well and better together. So this is one of many. And in fact, there's another one called the Roles and Responsibilities play. They call it a play. And we're actually going to be running that on Thursday with the team because we have some new team members. And that's one we've used several times over the last 2 years. And that's another great one that is not planning related, but if you think about roles and responsibilities, if your team's not clear on who's doing what or who's not doing what, then it can cause a lot of stress in pretty much any aspect of your team working together. So I highly recommend the roles and responsibilities play. If you click through on that link about the project poster template, you'll be able to easily find the roles. And there it is. Perfect. Any other questions? Happy to take a couple more before we close the stream. Okay. Yep, there's the team playbook as well now in the chat window. A lot of great resources from Atlassian. We actually had a former colleague who was at Atlassian for many years and brought those best practices to our team, which has been, I don't know about you, Antonio, but I think it's fantastic stuff. And I think it's really helped us build that team culture and that like iterative sort of working on the team, right? Not just working on the products that we deliver.
Yeah, it's also just framed out really well where it says this is how you run the play. These are the things you're going to need. This is the time you'll require. This is a great environment to do it in. And so it's great. It says this is like why you do it, but also gives a great how to do it as well. And one other thing that just kind of rounds it out altogether, I think a question that was posted in channel 2 is that there's good principle to start out. And everyone says like, yeah, you should have a vision and mission, but it's good to revisit these as well on your vision, your mission, your strategy, your company objectives, your project objectives, making sure you have a good one-pager and whys. And once you got those good foundational bits, it's good to iterate on them and say, for this particular team that we're working with, these set of human beings, we have some good cornerstones we can build off of, but how do we tweak these and how do we build off them to make sure they're good for the team? And that's what like the team plays does. And there's also some health checks, roles and responsibilities, and making sure that these unique set of human beings that are very special to work with and invested their time into, you have some good principles, so it's just not wide open, super wide open, and goes for, you know, everything's possible, but you have some good things that you feel that are good for the team on core principles, and then iterate from there, and then also ask for feedback and figure out what works well for the team.
Antonio, there was a question about R&D as part of the roadmap. Thought maybe that would be a good one for you to talk about.
Yeah, so I think it says it would say planning is harder than your button store is also great in that regard. Yeah, and we don't have a dedicated you know, R&D budget that we're going to do. What we try to do as a team, though, where we try to include R&D, is we try to say, hey, in this particular quarter, we want to do research and discovery around this particular item that we think, you know, we want to figure out which technology to use. We also want to figure out whether we think we're going to get the right user uptick. So we'll actually put it almost as the same way we do a feature in the current roadmap. We'll say in this quarter, we want to learn some additional things around this particular subject, technology, and or feature. And that the success in that may be a document that describes what we went and researched and what were our findings. And that could literally be what we want to do in that quarter. And based off of those findings, that'll then influence if we pivot in the quarter and or what we do for the next quarter. So our R&D, we bake into a capped amount of time that we'll go and research something. And it could be as much as just a document, or it could be something we do a POC on with a small feature flipper of users to get some data on it. So that's how I say on Marketplace, we do kind of our R&D.
Yeah, and I'd add that it's like any other thing the team would work on, right? Sometimes the team is laying down code. Sometimes they're doing investigation. Other times they're trying to figure out what is the best way to go where we're trying to go next. And that's how I would view R&D. And I know some companies do have a separate function for that. We do not. And I think there's pluses and minuses to doing it that way. At DO, though, it's definitely team driven, and it's really up to the teams to figure out where do you want to place your bets.
Gotcha. And we're about to wrap up, but I did want to apologize. I used the acronym there. I try not to do that. A POC is a proof of concept. It's the smallest bit of work that you could do to prove that a technology works. They could also call it a spike. Basically saying for this thing we want to work on, what is a small thing we could do to go learn about it, or to prove it works, or to just see what are the other dependencies we're going to have to consider as well in the design process itself. So POC, proof of concept, mainly used in kind of the research and development phase or the discovery phase.
Yeah, it's a great way to sort of de-risk larger initiatives, or to even figure out, should we do something or should we not do something? And we had a recent example around that within the past year where there was a specific thing related to the marketplace that we thought would be helpful to customers and to vendors. We implemented, or I should say Antonio and his team implemented a very, very light version of that feature. We put it in, we put it behind feature flipper and A/B testing platform. We use Optimizely for those who care, but there's lots of them out there. And in that POC, we determined, maybe it took a couple days of an engineer's time to set it up, but we determined that, hey, you know what, we're kind of off the mark here, and there's really not a lot of demand for this. So spending 2 days of an engineer's time versus 2 months of building a thing that no one wants, that's what we're trying to do. And we're not perfect, right? We don't get it right all the time, but I think we, more often than not, because we sort of ease into these things and slice off some early POCs or do some initial discovery work or some A/B testing, it lets us pretty quickly figure out, is there something there, and should we continue to go down this path? Any other questions? Happy to take one or two more before we hit half past the hour. Or everyone can go to dinner or lunch, or I know people are coming in from around the world, so happy to give you a few minutes back as well. Yes, Quinn, this will be archived for later viewing, and it will be at do.co/tech talks. And it will also be on the YouTube channel. It'll be recorded, or it is recorded, and it'll be there shortly after the broadcast, I believe. Okay, I think we're going to call it a wrap. Antonio, thanks as always. It's always fun to do this with you, and thanks to everyone who joined and had some great questions. Really helped us dig deeper and helping to really articulate, why we work this way and what are the things that we think that can really help you and your teams to ultimately have what we like to call pain-free quarterly planning. So thank you so much. I'm going to drop off. Have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, whatever may be applicable to you. And thank you so much, and happy coding.
Thank you.